Praise the Lord. Okay, I think we're back on now. Thank you for hanging in there. Please invite a friend. We know how we do it here on Family Matters. Let someone know that we are back on. The glitch has been fixed, and we're going to continue with our discussion. Once again, we have our dear friend Tony Borcalisto. We've been practicing law for some years, very experienced. You can tell from our last conversation. And today we're going to be asking a bunch of questions. Some questions already came in, but if you have some more, please let us know your question. Now, one of the questions that was asked is a question from a medical doctor that would want to relocate someone in the medical field. Let's just use that. But precisely a medical doctor. But this applies to a nurse, a physiotherapists, and people in that field that would want to relocate to the US. Either they're here or they want to come in with the EB2. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, the medical doctors specifically have a requirement for you have to get the license in the United States, in the state where you're going to be practicing. So you have to sit for the board. Some of those boards require you to have 2 years of residency inside the United States. So for doctors with a lot of experience, it's a problem. Go back to school for 2 years. So it becomes an impediment for a lot of them. So you have the chance to. You're not picking up the sound? That's all right. So we're saying for us to speak louder, but we get more feedback if we do. So we're talking about medical doctors, right? There is a problem with doctors not to get a green card per se. Even if you get married, they get a green card. If you want to practice as a doctor, in the United States, as opposed to most parts in the world, we have a bachelor's of medical school. So you go to school right out of high school, you go to medical school in most countries, 5, 6 years. And then you do your residency and you get your license to practice. In the United States specifically, you have to go to a 4-year bachelor's degree. We call it a pre-med. It can be any degree related to the medical field. But you're not a doctor. Then you go to medical school, which is a medical doctor when you do a doctorate. And that's another 4 years in medical school alone. You do a lot of rotations, and then you sit for the boards, and you go get residency. And then you go, depends on the program you do one or 2 years of residency. Then you can do the fellowship, which is the specialization you want to do. Some other programs like surgery or so, you have even longer periods of time to do. So it's typically 10 years or more. So when somebody comes from the outside with a medical degree, that's basically a 6-year program or a 5-year program from another country, they have an equivalency requirement. So they typically don't know what you know in the experience you have. So they tell you, you know what, why don't you go back and do residency here again? And then you sit for the boards. So the first thing that normally doctors have to do is they have to take an exam to see how they qualify to be selected or compete for a good residency. So you come from the outside, just like doctors graduate here, and you do a test to see how you qualify to get into a program for residency. And that is, you can come if you speak the language and you can take the test. Typically, it's not very hard, technically. But if you don't score really, really high, then normally the hospitals don't get you. So you have to take that exam once you're really well prepared, because you're competing with the students here in the United States for the same spots. And if you don't do well, even though you pass the test, you don't find an opening for your residency, and therefore you cannot complete. So this is one of the problems with doctors. It is a competitive field, and it's not completely equivalent, so they make you jump through some hoops. So we have seen doctors get the green card if they, for instance, have a clinical background. So they have a clinic that they open, let's say a 24-hour care facility, right? And they manage their own facility. So they come in with, as a medical doctor, where they have a business background, and they come here to run those clinics. Then it's easier because they don't have to be medical doctors signing the prescriptions and seeing patients, but they can be behind the scene managing the practice. In those cases, it's a little bit easier because you come into the business side of the medical practice as opposed to the medical doctor license itself. So that requires some schooling. It requires you to massage and do some tests in the right place. So we have some doctors that we use to guide some of the people that come in, because they have to see which area of practice they actually want to be in. And if somebody comes in with 10 years experience, 10 years of practice, sometimes they don't want to go back to school and do a residency again. But we see doctors who are saying, you know what, I have practiced enough medicine, I don't need to do it again. I can be on the business side of it. So, or I can teach, or I can do something different in the area, but not necessarily as the practitioner. And those have been a little bit more successful using the EB2 visa, for instance.
So in other words, if you want to apply as a medical doctor, you have to, you can't apply for the EB2 until you have your license here to practice medicine.
The EB2 requires you to have an advanced degree. Yeah. Typically, a medical doctor will have that. And if they have the years of experience and they're good, they'll pass that part of the requirement. The part of the requirement they have a problem with is to show that you are well positioned to come here into the United States and to develop that endeavor. But if you're not licensed, how are you going to develop that endeavor? So you can't pass unless you show what steps you're going to take. So what we do is we create a business plan or a personal plan for a professional and say, once I come to the United States, so here's my background. This is everything I know. This is my experience of publications or, advanced awards, recognition, and so forth. But once you come to the United States, how are you going to put it into practice? So we developed a business plan. And that's what we're going to do first, second, third, and eventually you're going to carry that endeavor. It's almost like a contract. You're promising to come here to do something special that's in the national interest, that's of merit and substance. And then you have to show that you are well positioned to do it. And that's when a license becomes either a solution or a problem. So if you have a job waiting for you from a hospital that has a job offer for you, the problem is you cannot practice without a license. Then you have to go get that license done. And sometimes it's 2 years of residency. Sometimes you have to go, you can come to teach. That's a different story. If you can come to teach, you don't have to have a license.
Okay.
So you can teach. You can develop a business in the area. You can do research. You can do a lot of things that may not necessarily, may not require for you to have the license. And then it's okay. So you have to be creative in how you do it with doctors.
So with doctors, they have to consult someone like you to...
Yeah, it's not an automatic.
Yes.
You just don't come say, I'm a doctor and I'm good and just give me a green card, because they cannot practice here.
Yeah.
So being able to work in the United States, that's the green card. Being able to practice a doctor, you have to have another license from the state.
Okay.
So that's the difference. If you can get a license from the state, typically go to medical school here. If you go to medical school someplace else, then you're going to have to make this equivalency and get the license here. And every state has their own requirements. Some of them, and most of them, are going to require you to have 2 years of residency in the United States to do it. And if you do that, then it's almost like finishing medical school again and getting from the beginning as a resident.
Yeah.
Residents get paid $50,000, $60,000 a year. It's not like you're going to starve. But it's going back to the beginning of the line. And a lot of people don't want to do that. After they have been practicing for a long time, they think that is a downgrade. But if you're young enough and you don't mind going to school and you want to practice medicine because that's your goal, that's your dream, then we need to find a way to get you in school here for the residency. Do the test, do it well, come in here, spend 2 years, doing the residency, and then you can practice for the rest of your life. So the younger people have an easier time.
Okay.
They're not so proud. The old doctors, they say, I'm not going back to school and do this again. They're more likely to retire, so they come in, open a company, a business, a hospital, a clinic, and then we can do the business side of it, or they can teach medical school. So those are more likely the EB2 type of
So does this
scenario.
apply to professions that need licensing to practice in the U.S.?
Yes. The
For
lawyers,
Any
doctors,
profession that needs a
dentists,
license,
yeah.
nurses even?
those require licenses. They have to be able to get their license out of the
Okay,
way.
what about nurses?
Nurses also have to go get their license.
So anything that needs
but
license?
the nurses are a little bit easier.
Okay.
Typically, we can get them through the EB2, and they are scheduled way. They're sometimes easier to get. Physical therapists, especially, easy to get. They have they're known to be a demand for them. Not enough people, so they have an easier way to get through the labor department.
Okay.
But they have to go get certified by the boards. They have to sign and do the tests and get certified.
Okay.
A lot of them get the jobs, and they come in and then they do the tests.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, but this is a requirement for them to practice.
Okay. So basically, any profession that needs a license here in the United States to practice,
Right.
you have to be creative in doing the EB5.
Well,
The
put it this
EB2,
way.
EB2, I'm sorry.
Yeah, put it this way. It doesn't matter how you get it, through a family, through EB1, EB2, EB3, EB5, you get a green card. That's half of the problem.
Yes.
The other half is how you're going to practice medicine.
Yeah.
You need to get a license that's valid here.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going through the same thing with pilots right now.
Okay.
So there's a big shortage of pilots for airlines. And the requirement for the airlines is that you have an FAA Part 121 hour. That means you have to fly in the United States under the U.S. license, the FAA license. So if you have an European or any other country, they give you the license. It's the same as here, but the FAA does not recognize those hours. So you come in just like a fresh guy you have 10,000 hours under your belt. You just get your equivalency for your license here, but the airlines are not going to give you any credit for those hours. So you start again, just like a new pilot would. Of course, you have the background experience, and you probably have an accelerated process to get into a captain again, but they cannot recognize those for experience.
If you fly for a private,
That's
owner.
fine. We have private jets, people who fly those. We bring them in, but they go to an airline instead of being a captain. They're going to be a first officer. They're going to have to fly about 1,000, 1,500, about a year to 2 years, again under the FAA license this time, for them to get to the point where they can become a captain again. So being able to work in the U.S. is the green card is going to allow you to. But work under that profession, that's a licensing. State law is a separate problem.
Yeah.
So we have to be creative to see how we get the least resistance, the path of least resistance, right?
So getting the green card to
Right.
come in here.
I'll give an example. I first graduated law school in Brazil.
Okay.
So in Brazil, we have a 5-year, full-time, 230 credit hours to get your law degree. I passed the bar, and I was an attorney in Brazil. I came to the United States, and I went to SMU Law, and I did my master's of international law. And that is a master's degree, but law school in the U.S. is a doctorate. It's a jurisprudence doctorate. So you do your 4 years of undergrad, and then you go to the law school, and you do 3 years of law school, which is a doctorate. And then you do the master's of law after you do the doctorate. When I came from Brazil, I came as a lawyer. So I went straight to the master's. And my colleagues had just finished their doctorate to be able to get their law degree, which I didn't. I went straight as a bachelor's to the master's, bypassed the JD. Afterwards, I decided to go back to school to get my doctorate degree. So I went back to SMU, and I did my jurisprudence doctor also. The difference is, if I wanted to practice in the United States as a foreign attorney, all I needed to do is to have one degree from an accredited law school, which the LLM or the master's was enough. So in 1 year, with the master's, I was able to then sit for the bar. I went to New York and I passed the New York bar. And then if swear in, you become an attorney in the United States, but I was able to practice in New York. But I was not able to practice in Texas. In order to practice in Texas, I went back to school for 3 more years. In the evenings, 4 years. And I did my JD. So now I can sit for the bar in Texas, and I got my license to practice in Texas.
Wow, that was a process.
It was a long process. But the example I give to you is, if you look for the path that's of least effort and resistance, all you need to do is come in here and do a 1 year master, and then you sit for the bar and you can practice.
Yes.
Now, I'll tell you what, I took, the New York bar took 27 subjects at a time. In my master's, I had 2 of them. So the other 20-some I had to study on my own. But you can do it. You're not completely prepared for it, but you have to study. But you can sit for an exam that's hard. You prepare yourself to do it, and you pass, and that's easy to go into practice. It doesn't mean that you should not go to school here and do everything here. It depends on what you want to do. For instance, if all I wanted to do was federal law and immigration law, I could practice that in Texas.
I was going to say that,
even though I was only licensed in New York.
Because the federal law.
Because federal law is the same, right?
Yeah.
But I decided that I wanted to have a Texas license just because they said I couldn't.
Yeah.
And now what I do federal law.
Okay. Wow.
So I didn't need to go back,
yeah.
but it's too late now.
Yeah.
But it's just an example. If you want to come here and do all over again, you can. But sometimes you don't have to. You get the equivalency, you don't get to get your license the best way you can, and then you go back to practice. So getting the green card, that depends on your profession, sometimes is a catch-22. You have to have the license to be able to get the green card.
Yeah.
But typically, you don't have to have the license to get a green card if your green card is not based on that profession. So if you're going to do something that doesn't require the license, you can get a green card for being a good business person, for being a lecturer, a researcher, a professor, right? It doesn't require you to have a medical license. But if you're going to be somebody practicing medicine, you need a license. And if that's a requirement of your visa, you also need that for the green card. So it's a catch-22. We need to sit and talk.
Yeah.
So there are ways that are easier than others.
Okay.
And but doctors are typically a little complicated because of that factor.
Okay.
It takes a little bit of schooling, some tests, and a lot of the professions require that, but some don't.
So the EB3, what's the EB3?
Well, the EB3, the biggest difference between EB1, EB2, and EB3 is this. The EB1 is an employment base for people with very high level of education and achievement in their area. So you put us in the top 1% of any area is an EB1. Very few people qualify. Typically researchers and scholars and people who are really top. Yeah. But it's not very easy to qualify. So we know when we see them. The EB2, all you need to have is a master's, all you need to have is a doctorate, and or some years of experience and be good in your profession. If you're good in your profession, but you don't have to be the top guy, but you have to be one of the good guys in the area. Everybody knows in your area that you're good. You can get a job through an employer. That's the rule. Somebody likes you enough, they cannot find people here, they can bring you for the job. With the exception that you do not need to have an employer if you can provide evidence that you are a person of exceptional ability in that profession, in that area. And that you show that by showing a few things. One, you have the degree, advanced degree, or the equivalent to an advanced degree based on experience. So if you have 10 years experience in one area and you're really good and you can prove a few items, high salary, recognition, awards, and things like that, right? Member of some membership in a category, let's say the Bar Association or the Medical Society or something. Required licenses required to practice. You have some of those items, then they'll give you the exception of national interest.
Okay.
But now, besides having that experience and background, you have to show whatever you come to do is of national importance and national interest, and that you are well positioned to actually do it.
Yeah.
That's why you have a business plan, you have letters, and you have a bunch of references showing that you are prepared and able and willing to do it. So if you provide all of that, they'll give you a green card. But if you try to get that as a doctor or a lawyer, not only, so you don't have a job waiting for you. You're saying you're going to do it. How are you going to do it if you don't have a license?
So do it.
That's where the problem gets. So if you don't have a job and you don't have a license, how can you prove you're well positioned to do what you're saying you're going to do? So what we say is, if you're going to do business in medicine, if you're going to do research in medicine, teaching, that doesn't require you to be licensed.
Yeah.
You know your stuff. You can teach it. You can write books. You can do things. So in the medical area, if you can come in here and get your license done first, right, as a student, you get a student visa, come in here, do some residency, and then, by all means, once you're prepared, it's easy. But if you come from the code, coming in, say, I want a green card because I'm a good doctor, that's going to be hard because you don't have the license to practice yet.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you cannot get it. Don't get me wrong. But it's not fast and easy.
So that's the EB2.
That's for the EB2.
Yeah.
Now, the EB3 typically is the same thing as the EB2, but it does require a sponsor.
Okay.
The EB2, you have the exception that does not. You do the national interest waiver. Is a waiver of having to have a sponsor or test in the market. The EB3 does not have that. The EB3, you have to have a sponsor. And normally you have a skilled worker. Now, a skilled worker can be somebody with a degree, either advanced or bachelor's, or somebody with a degree that's not a full degree, like an associate's degree, a technician degree. It's fine. Even people without any degree, just skills, have 2 years experience in some area, that may be enough for you to prove enough skills. So we do that for people who work in air conditioning, people who work with painters, truck drivers, anybody who's got skills, 2 years experience, cooks, specialty cooks. Let's say you have specialty Brazilian food, or you have Nigerian food. You have a restaurant that's say Ethiopian.
Yeah.
Well, an Ethiopian chef that has 2 years experience then qualifies for that job as a skilled worker. Just like an engineer is a skilled worker with a degree. This one is without a degree. Truck driver, if you're a professional driver, with 2 years experience, and you know how to get those big rigs out there, Then you have the third one that says EB3s can be done for people that don't have degrees and don't have any skills. That's the unskilled worker. Typically, what happens is, let's say you have a small town in South Texas, and they have a McDonald's in there. And they advertise for people, and they can't find anybody. Nobody shows up. And they want to show up the first day, and then disappear on you. And they're having a hard time finding people, cleaning people for hotels, right? So what they do is they look for an agency, and the agency then finds people willing to work there for a year or two. And they sponsor through the agency, and they get people to come in, and they go put them to work. So they advertise, they can't find. They go to the labor department and get a certification. They could not find anybody. And they say, okay, you're authorized to import one. And then you file with immigration, and you bring that person. Once the person gets in here, they go to work. They have to stay there for 1 or 2 years in that job. That's it. The whole family comes with green cards, unskilled workers. They're going to flip burgers. They're going to clean the hotels and that kind of stuff. Only 10,000 a year. That's the limit.
Okay. So now, if someone visits the United States on a B1 visa and is here, is in status, in quote, right?
So it's a visitor visa.
It's a visiting visa.
Right.
And comes in here and fits into the EB3. Can they apply while they're in here?
Yes, they can. But we have one challenge. The challenge is, if you're a visitor, you typically get a visa is going to last you 6 months. At best. Sometimes 1 month or 2, but typically they give you 6 months so you don't bother them asking extensions. And within the 6 months, you cannot do the labor certification part. So the labor certification part for an EB3 or even EB2 if you have a sponsor, it typically takes you filing with Department of Labor. The employer has to file something called the prevailing wage determination. So you send a request to Department of Labor saying, okay, this is the job description. This is my zip code. This is the area where the job is. And you send that to them and saying, this company is asking you, what is the minimum that I need to pay somebody for this function, for this job? And the Department of Labor takes about 6 months to answer that. It used to be 8 weeks, and then went to 8 months. Now it's about 6 months average. So you have to get that determination. They're going to tell you
can apply.
before you can even start recruiting people, put in the newspaper, because that's how much you have to pay or more. You cannot pay less. So if you do it, you can advertise. But if you advertise for less than what they say, you have to start all over again. But typically you wait 6 months, get a prevailing wage. Now that you know, let's say it's $30,000. So you have to pay that $30,000 as a minimum. Then you go and advertise in the paper. You put it in the Texas Workforce Commission, you put in the Dallas Morning News for 2 Sundays, you put in the bulletin board in your company, you put the company website, and then you advertise for that position. You have to do it for 30 days or so. And then interview everybody who shows up. If anybody qualified appears waiting to take the job, that's the end of it. If nobody shows up, or anybody who does show up does not qualify, does not have the experience or the education or the requirements, then you can say, okay, nobody qualified showed up. And then you prepare a labor certification application and send that to the Department of Labor electronically. Takes them 6 months to get back to you. And that labor cert that we call, other people call it PERM, because it's the electronic system they use. So we send that information there, and that information then takes about 6 months for them to reply. Once they reply, 1/3 of the cases are picked for the auditing. Is an audit done because they trust that you put in the paper. They trust that you interviewed people. They trust that you did everything right. And before, we used to have sent everything to them for them to agree with us that we did a good recruitment in good faith. That nobody showed up that qualified. That we did not eliminate anybody who actually qualified. And they didn't believe you. So they said, nah, send me evidence of everything. Now they said, let's make it faster. We're just going to pick 1/3, and we're going to audit 1 out of every 3. The other 2 just get approved, right? Believing in you. So if you get picked for an audit, which 1/3 of the people do, it adds another 2 to 3 months to it, sometimes more. So now they certify, either before the audit in 2/3 of the cases, or after the audit in 1/3 of the cases, okay? So once you have a labor cert signed by them saying, now here, authorization for you to import somebody, now you can go to immigration and file the petition. Company can. If the visa is available for your country at that time, not
even
only
if you are in the United...
No, I'm talking about in the United States.
Yes.
If you're not in the United States, you file just a petition.
Okay.
If you are in the United States, you file the petition, and you have the ability to also file for adjustment of status, which gives you then work permit and work authorization, travel authorization.
Say that again. Now, under the EB3, the unskilled part of it,
right?
You have a visa, B1 visa, that they give you 6 months.
Right.
Now you're saying you have to wait the 6 months out before you can apply.
No. Let me go back and rephrase that for you.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes.
Here's what he's saying to me. Somebody came in and said, I'm a tourist.
Yes.
I'm going to Disney for a week.
Yes.
And then after they come in
Yes.
and decide that Disney was nice, I want to stay here.
Yeah.
They look for an attorney or a company and say, you guys can, I want to flip burgers for you. I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Have you experience? No, I don't. But
No.
the EB3 unskilled doesn't require that.
No, that's not what
So
I'm
that's
saying.
good, right? So I can do anything that doesn't require any skills.
Yeah.
I'm breathing.
Yeah.
I can walk, and I qualify. Well, the company now goes and does everything that I told you.
Yeah.
Remember, you have only 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
And then you find a company the second week you're here.
Yeah.
You're really lucky. and you change your mind, decide
Yeah.
to stay here.
Yes.
Okay. Now the company goes and does the prevailing wage.
Yes.
6 months.
Yeah. You're out.
Then you spend 2 more months, you're adult status.
Yeah.
Then you spend 2 more months doing the search, looking for people, and then you have to wait 30 days for a cooling off period, and then after that, they file the labor certification, which takes another 6 months. Now we're talking about a year and 2 months, best case scenario. If there's an audit, it goes from 14 months to now 17 months, right? So in 17 months, you could file to immigration. You only got 6. So what happens to people when they come in as a tourist to try to do anything on labor cert? They have no time. They cannot do it. So typically what happens to people is they have to wait outside, go back to your country, find the employer, go back to your country, wait there. And they do everything we're talking about, and they file the petition. Once they file the petition, it may take, if you pay some premium processing, it can be 3 months, 2 months, or it can take a year to get approved. Depends on what the time for adjudication is. Once that petition is approved, it goes to the consular processing. It takes another 6 months or so. Then you can come to work. But you come with the green card and bring your family with you. So it's great. Finding the employer that's willing to wait that long, it's not so easy. And there's a cost associated with it. Most companies don't like to pay. It may be like $10,000 to $15,000 at the end of the day. So somebody to find a unqualified person and spend that kind of money typically is not easy to find.
Okay.
That's why it's hard to get.
Okay.
So a lot of people bring friends, or they bring people who say, you pay for everything, I will just sign the paperwork.
Okay.
That's more likely people can find. Some of the fees, though, for the recruiting, the law says the employer has to pay.
Pay.
But even if you're willing to pay and reimburse the employer for the most of it, it's hard to convince somebody to wait that long
for it.
If you are here, though, and you have a way to stay here legally, for instance, let's say that you're a student, and you're coming here to do a 1 year or 2 year program, that's a different story, because you can be going to school and studying, maintaining your status while this is going on in the background.
Yes.
And the only time that you show up is the time to file for your green card.
Okay, let me ask a question. Now, someone that comes in with their family on an F1 visa.
Yes.
Now, the primary F1 visa owner is the one that is allowed to even work with the school, right?
Typically, the F1 cannot work.
Yeah, but some
until
schools,
they graduate, and then if they graduate, they typically get a 1 year practical training, or they get 3 years practical training
Right,
if they have
okay.
a STEM.
now, so if their spouse is living here and is in status in quote because of, so can they qualify for the EB3? Can they apply for
Anybody can, yes.
Yes, so while they're in here,
If your spouse is here
is in
working or
school,
studying, and
yes,
you're here, you qualify.
you can qualify for
Yes.
it. Wow. Interesting. Okay, we just got the question in. This is digression from the pattern I want to go. So I'll hold this one. Hey, friends, we started late, so please bear with us. We're going to go past our time tonight to get in all the questions in. But Callisto is pretty busy. I don't know if we'll find another favor to get him back. So as much as we can do tonight, please just allow us to do tonight. Now, my question is, if someone is still connected to the EB3 or something similar, if someone is in status because they are asylum seekers, do they qualify for the EB3?
Yes. But depends on how they got into the asylum.
Okay, explain.
So let me explain how the asylum works.
Now, my question, viewers, is this. Someone came in here for asylum, and they've gotten their asylum. They've not gotten it.
Right.
They're still in process.
Right.
They have the EAD. They can walk.
Right.
They can do all of those.
Right.
Why they're going through that? Can they qualify for the EB3 is one of the questions.
Yeah. So the real question here is, in order for you to adjust at the end of the EB3,
Yes.
if you're inside the country, you have to be able to adjust your status, which means you have to leave the status you're in and adjust into a green card.
Okay.
That's done through the filing of an application for I-485. In order for the 485 to be approved, you cannot have committed any crimes, violated anything, be crazy, or done anything wrong, violated your immigration status. So typically what happens is, let's say that you're a student, and then after you graduated, you get into an H-1B, and you have like 3 to 6 years as an H-1B. And then somebody files an application for you through the EB-3 process, right? At that point, when the I-140, which is the petition, is approved, or at the same time that you file the 485 alongside the I-140, the petitioner files the petition for you, and you file the application for adjustment of status for you and your family at the same time. In order for that to be approvable, which may take like 12 months to be approved, you have to be in status at the time that you file. You have to be legally here in status. Okay? That's a requirement. Now, for EBs, it is true that you can be out of status for technical reasons up to 180 days and still adjust. It's called 245K, is an exception. It's not the most comfortable, but it's possible to be done. But if you're not in status and you file for adjustment of status, it's going to be denied because you had to be in status. So let's go back to the question you had about asylum. Asylum seekers, as opposed to refugee, a refugee is somebody outside the country asking to come here, seeking protection. So they get to be in a camp waiting for being processed, and then they get resettled by bringing them in and putting them to live some place. That's a refugee.
Yeah.
If you come into the United States or come to the border and you ask protection, that's an asylum. So asylum for people inside the country.
Yes.
Refugees for people outside the country.
Yes.
Okay? So you come in here, and then once you're here, you have 1 year to apply for asylum. And most people apply, and if they don't give an interview and resolve your case pretty quickly, typically you go in the back burner, and sometimes it takes 5 years for you to get an interview. During those 5 years, you have a permission to work after 180 days.
Yeah.
So you get an employment authorization document, and you can stay in the country working while they're processing your case. The question now is, if you came into the United States as a student, okay, and while you're a student in status, you apply for asylum because something changed in your country, somebody's trying to kill you, you were in status when you entered into the asylum.
Okay.
That tolls your legal status until the end of your asylum application is processed. Therefore, if you were in status before the asylum, you came with a visa, and before it expired, you filed for asylum, that means you maintained your status. Asylum bridges you from the beginning to the end of the asylum, and you go back to the status you had before as a tolling. That means you qualify for an EB-3 because you had status at the beginning.
Let me understand. I will ask questions to understand what you just said.
Okay.
Now, someone comes into the United States and they give them a 6 months to stay.
Okay.
And within the 6 months, they file for asylum. Within the 6 months.
That's fine.
Before they were out of status.
Yes.
Before they were out of status.
Yes.
Though the asylum requirement is within 1 year.
Yes.
But they did it between the 6 months they were in status.
Then they are maintaining their status.
They are maintaining the status so they can file for an EB-3.
Yes.
But if they file after the 6 months, but within the 1 year and they qualify for the asylum,
they were no longer in status.
They were no longer in status.
Therefore, they are out of status. They cannot qualify for the adjustment of status.
Oh, wow.
Now, if their claim for asylum is approved,
yes,
even if they came in without a visa or they were out of status when they applied, asylum is one of those cases that permits you to adjust
your status,
being out of status, if it is approved.
Okay.
Problem is the asylum cases are rarely approved. In Dallas, we're at about 90 to 95% rejection rate, the immigration judges in Dallas. So it's not very encouraging. That tells you two things. Most people filing for asylum don't have a real claim, first. Second, the judges are very stingy approving them. Sometimes because they're stingy, but even when they want to approve, the legal basis for an asylum is very limited. You know, you have only 5 things that you're protected from. Nationality, you're being persecuted with the basis of your persecution, the reason, right, on account of nationality, race, religion, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group that's being persecuted. So the only things that you get protection from are those 5. So if, let's say, you come from Central America and the gangs are beating people up there, raping them, extorting them, killing them, and you come looking for protection, too bad. Why? Because that's not one of the 5.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes we get people, we try to create a particular social group to fit people in to see if you get the protection. That's what lawyers do, and they try really hard. Some are really creative, but it's complicated. Like in Africa, remember the female genital mutilation? That's one of the groups that we are successful in getting asylum, because it is a cultural thing, it's an ongoing thing, right? And is recognized as being a violence that kids don't have how to protect themselves. And so that is, if you can prove that's the case, if you go back, that's going to happen to you because of your family or religion or your, tribe or culture, then we can protect people from going back. That's a known fact, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's very difficult sometimes to say, oh, Christians are being persecuted. Well, if you go back to Iran, after you left Iran and you converted to Christianity here in the United States, if you go back there, they'll cut your head off. If you're born a Christian there, nobody's going to touch you. But if you convert out of Islam, they'll cut your head off because they're an infidel. So that's the thing that we get protection from people from Iran if they convert here. But the real question is, did you really convert, or are you just saying so? So you can get a green card. So that's the test.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. But again, most of them are denied because people don't have the actual basis or how to prove it. So asylum is great for you to get a work permit for a while, but it's not so good to get approved unless you have a very good evidence.
Along the lines of asylum, if someone had an asylum case going on and they eventually find someone they are in love with and get married.
You can have more than one basis to be here. For instance, you can have an EB3 case going on, and an EB2 case going on, in a marriage case going on, in an asylum case going on, all at the same time.
All at the same time.
There's no limits.
But what I'm saying is, if the initial one that put them in status after the 6 months was an asylum.
So they are out of status, they file for asylum.
They file for asylum.
Yeah. Marriage cases have one exception, 245A is the basis of it, that allows people to adjust status inside the United States if they came in with a visa.
Okay.
Even though that visa expired and they run out of status. Remember last week I said something about being an invitee into a party?
Yeah.
So if you came to this party with a visa and you overstayed, forgot to leave, and then you get married, it's okay. They'll let you adjust.
Yes.
If you jump the fence, came through the river, and then you get married, they don't.
Okay.
You have to leave, and you have to come back again with a visa, then they'll let you in. The problem is if you leave after being illegally here, they'll give an impediment, to give you a bar.
10 years.
3 or 10, depends on how long you stay. Unless you get an exception, it's called a waiver. If you get a waiver with some extreme hardship to a family member, sometimes you get it forgiven, sometimes you don't. So the marriage case is good if you came in with a visa.
Okay.
Okay.
No, so but my question is, someone comes into the United States. Within the 6 months they were in status, they didn't file the asylum.
Okay.
After the 6 months they were out of status.
Right.
They filed the asylum within 1 year.
Right.
They got the asylum process going on.
Right.
They've not gone through the final verdict of it.
Right.
Can they adjust their status when they find someone that they're in love with and they're married to the person?
Depends on how they came to the United States.
They came through visa.
If they had a tourist visa the
They
first
had a
time they
tourist
came in,
visa.
yes, they can adjust
So
here.
they came in through a tourist visa.
Yes.
They came in through a tourist visa.
Yeah.
They lived in the United
It doesn't make a difference if they came in, went out of status and got into asylum and got a work permit,
Yes.
or if they came with the visa expired, they have been here without a visa for 10 years. It doesn't matter. They get married,
Yeah.
they can adjust.
Okay, so
As long as they enter here with a visa.
if the couple came in with the
But it has to be a U.S. citizen,
yes, US
not a
citizen, yes,
resident.
yeah. So if the couple came in here and they're going through an asylum process, the couple, and in the course of their going through the process, you say some takes 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depends. Now, if it's taking that long and something happened, God forbid, it's not what we pray. God hate divorce, and they go their separate way,
Right.
and they go find love somewhere else and get married. Can they adjust as well?
Yeah.
They can adjust.
As long so when you adjust to a marriage,
Yeah.
the standard is you have to show the marriage was entered into in good faith.
Yeah, in good faith. Yeah.
At the inception.
Yeah.
There's a movie out there, old movie called Green Card. Jeopardo was there as a music piano player, and he gets married with Andy McDowell, the character, just for the green card. And immigration finds out and is about to deport him, and they actually fall in love, and they try to stop the deportation. They cannot, because they enter into the marriage for green card only.
Yeah.
That's a fraudulent marriage. So you can never fix a bad marriage when it starts that way.
Okay.
So what happens is the opposite is true. If you get married for the right reasons in good faith, and the marriage goes bad,
Yeah.
you don't lose your green card because you entered into it in good faith, the right way. So a good marriage does never get bad for immigration purposes.
Okay.
But a bad marriage never goes good after you married for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
You have to divorce, marry again, then you can do it.
Okay.
I'm serious. I mean, I've done it before. People get in, have to get divorced, and then get remarried, at this time for the right reason, to constitute family and to build a life together.
Questions.
Then you can.
I'm just building up questions. Some of the questions here. Someone asked if I was married before, and and I filed with that marriage, and for some reason the person was denied, and there was an eviction. What do you call it now? Later removal notice sent.
Oh, deportation.
Deportation.
Removal, yeah.
Can this person, in the course of that deportation removal, find love again? And because that's the case, they found love again, and they're married. Can they open the case all over again?
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of cases out there with first, second, third marriages.
Yeah.
The issue is when you try to apply for a green card through marriage,
Yeah.
the burden of proof
Increase.
is on the petitioner and the applicant. Petitioner is the U.S. citizen. Applicant is the beneficiary spouse. They have the burden of proof. Now, when the marriage is less than 2 years old, there is a rebuttable presumption. You can rebut it, but there is a presumption that the marriage is fake, which in effect means that instead of just the preponderance of the evidence, which is 50% plus a little bit, it now is higher. In the first 2 years of the marriage, the burden of proof is higher than the preponderance. Okay, it's not clear and convincing yet, and it's not beyond reasonable doubt, but it's more than just a preponderance, which means you have to make more effort to show a good faith marriage. And how do you show a good faith marriage? How do you know a marriage is real and is good? Well, immigration have their own ways of accepting evidence. So the trappings of a normal marriage, having kids together, having debt together, having joint bank accounts, tax returns, insurance, wills, right? You have live in the same place, and then you buy property, you create debt, credit cards, and all sorts of crazy stuff that married people actually do. They expect to see that. And then if you show up there and say, no, I live in my own apartment. We're married, but I have my own life. I have my own bank account. We don't do this kind of stuff. Immigration said, we don't give this kind of green card either. So the point is question of evidence, okay?
Yeah.
So it's possible, yes. But if you have 2 or 3 marriages, they all failed, and then you keep trying, they're gonna think you a serial wetter for green card purposes. So it becomes harder and harder.
The burden of proof becomes.
And on the other side of the adjudication, you have an officer who does that for a living. That's how he does. He knows all the tricks. He looks at people, he looks at the age. So you show up there, and you get I got a case like this that I saw the guy. He did an MBA. He was a guy from an Arab country. He dressed with those striped suits like a lawyer, right? When he showed up in immigration, people think, are you a lawyer? So no, I'm the client. Uh-oh. So he went all dressed up, perfume, hair really well done, nails really polished. His wife was a lady who had been had been arrested for prostitution 6 times, had 5 kids, each one a different father, didn't have half of the teeth in her mouth. And you look at the two, and she was like 40 or some years old, really old, really badly dressed. The guy was like
Clean.
an MBA, going to work at Price Waterhouse after that, right? If you look at that couple, one is Muslim, one is Christian. It doesn't match.
Yeah,
it doesn't. Nobody's going to believe that's real.
Yeah.
And this guy shows up there with that woman. Everybody's looking at him and said, what does he have in his head? And then everybody else is stupid. So there's just no way that's going to work. So if you have people in the same age, same religion, same culture, right? Same race, same haircut, and they look like each other, they speak like each other, right? They go to the same church, they sing. One starts the sentence, the other one finishes it.
Yeah.
Normally the woman finishes it, right?
Yeah.
And then, the officer is going to look at that and say, yeah, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
And the evidence looks right, and everything looks good. Even if they investigate. How do they investigate? Well, you have a cell phone number.
Yeah.
You have a cell phone number. They pick those numbers, and now they do a search to see which tower every night is pinging. Because they know if you sleep in Plano, your wife sleeps in Oak Cliff. Something's up.
Something's wrong.
Right? If they look at your bank statement, and they look there, you buy at Plano, Kroger's at Plano, and your wife is buying at Fiesta in Fort Worth. What the heck's going on here, right? Your gas station, where you put the gas, where you... So they look at your behavior. They look at your social media. They look at patterns. Exactly. So they're much more sophisticated than people think.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get in trouble because they think they can fool, and they can't.
Yeah.
So typically what I do with my clients is I get them to understand this is not a game.
Yeah.
And if you think you're playing that game, you're lost already. So typically you have to go out of your way to create the evidence that shows a good faith marriage. Yeah. Tax returns have to be done together. You know, you go get the stuff that really proves over and beyond.
Along that line, there's a question last week. We didn't go deep into it because we're running out of time. The question is, this individual was married to a U.S. citizen, and they had filed their petition. And before they could call them, the U.S. citizen passed on, died.
Right.
And went in for the interview. There's a grant for that, right?
Yeah, typically if you're married, and there's a case pending, and the petitioner dies before the case is granted.
What if they've not filed?
We have to look at it. But
they were married.
Yeah, you can still. Sometimes we have 2 years for a widow petition. So you have 2 cases here.
Yes, 2 years.
Somebody is married to a U.S. citizen, and the person passes. You typically have 2 years to file a 360, which is a petition for a widow or widower. If the case is pending, it converts from I-130 to the 360 automatically. You don't have to refile. If the case is not filed yet, you have a couple of years to be able to file. You still do it. Okay? So it's possible.
It's possible.
But there is a problem there with the affidavit of support. Typically, the petitioner has to sign an affidavit of support, showing that in case the government needs to get reimbursed by, in case somebody uses public assistance, the petitioner is signing saying that they will reimburse the government. And when the petitioner passes, then you don't have that person anymore to incur that responsibility. You have to have a substitute
For affidavit.
for the affidavit support.
Okay. Question. Some of the questions coming in. Someone wants to know. The first question was another question in line with it. They are in the U.S., probably green card holder, or maybe a U.S. citizen. But let's assume, put the ball down to a green card holder, and they want to adopt either a grandkid or a nephew or a niece. How does that process go?
Okay, so there are two layers to that question. The first one is the legal adoption process. It's complicated enough for anybody who doesn't need a green card. So adopting is typically complicated because you have to go through a bunch of hoops. There is a home study, social study to make sure you're fit to be a parent, right? And then you have to say that people have the financial stability and the location.
What about if they have kids?
So it's just
if they have kids
to
already,
adopt,
if they have kids of their own already.
Yeah, if you have kids, but even if you don't, do you have a place for this kid to be safe?
But if you have kids
So
on
the
your
social
own,
worker is going to come and look at you.
does
and
that
say,
not cover that you already know how to
if
take
you have a
care?
history of abusing kids, they're not going to let you.
Yeah.
If you have a criminal background or abuser, you're not going to get it. If you're a felon, you're not going to get it, right? If people are living together, they're not married, you're not going to get it.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff here that goes on just into adoption, per se. Separate that now. On top of that, you're going to say, okay, a U.S. citizen can bring their kids into the United States, up to 21 single. So if you adopt somebody, that becomes your kid. So now you have the ability to bring your kid here. But because there are protections, too many countries, you are just selling kids. And trafficking kids and under the guise of adoption. So to curtail that kind of activity, they have conventions. The Hague Convention has been adopted by most countries. And now the process of adoption is regulated by the terms of the Hague. And even the countries that are not adoptees of these conventions, the USCIS, the Immigration Services, is forcing them to use the same system. So I used to do adoption from countries like Ghana and other countries, and they were not part of the Hague. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the case, they said, no, from this point on, everybody's going to follow the Hague, being a part of it or not. So you had to change the whole thing. So you have agencies that have to be sponsoring you and checking you out and then monitoring you going on. But here's the rule for adopting kids. The easiest way to adopt a kid is to adopt an orphan.
Okay.
Why? Because you have no parents that you need to terminate their rights.
Yeah.
Orphans are easy. So if you say a nephew, a niece, I've done adoptions for nephews and nieces.
Yeah.
But the sister and the husband have died. Grandma is taking care of the kid.
So that's the question.
Therefore, it's easier because now it's an orphan.
Yeah.
And then you show the family relationship and you prove to the state that you're the best person to take care of the kid. You do the legal adoption, but you have a whole process to do it.
Let me ask a question.
Yes.
If a family in the U.S. that probably they're out of status, and I like the kid, and can I adopt that child and file for the child?
Again, is an orphan?
Yes. Not an orphan.
Yeah. So an orphan is easier, but in order to terminate the parental rights to adopt, if immigration thinks that the only reason you're adopting is to legalize that kid, but in fact that kid is still going to be with parents, not going to work.
No, but if I am adopting the kid for real, and really,
then
they have other kids, but I'm picking one of them to adopt the kid.
Again, it's a burden of proof, right? So
it's a burden of proof.
Yeah, what happens a lot is people try to bring their brothers, sisters, cousins.
No, this one we're not related. We're not related.
Yeah. And that's the evidence that you need to put in is to showing that you are adopting that kid in earnest, in good faith, and there's nothing hanky-panky going on. So it's possible, yes. some adoptions, adoption of adults, it's complicated. Adoption of relatives that have living parents is complicated, right? It's a question of evidence. Some people have parents, but they're not very they're not very good to take care of the
someone
kids.
that don't have kids of their own, they can have kids of their own, and they see someone they want to adopt that is not related, you know.
What I suggest in those cases, if you're thinking seriously about adopting and you need the immigration component into it. So adoption by itself is complicated already, so you need help and support. If you're going to do anything that requires immigration to be involved, you need to get the information beforehand.
Okay.
Because the order, some people go and adopt in the home country. I already got my adoption done. So I got a lawyer, go there, adopt. And then you try to get a visa for that kid. Too late.
No, I'm even talking of one resident in the U.S.
No, resident in the U.S. is just a legal adoption. You don't have to worry about the immigration part of it.
Let me go over the
So
question.
the kids here unlawfully.
They came in lawfully.
Yeah.
Lawfully.
Then they run out of status.
They ran out of status.
I see.
Now, over time, I want to adopt one of their child, you know, and say, okay, I need someone to care for. I just want to make this one my own. And the parents are willing to terminate their right and turn it over.
Yeah, that's an easier case because what happens is typically if everybody's in the U.S., you're going to have an adoption just like any other adoption.
Yeah.
You're going to be checked out by the state, and then you're going to go to a judge in the state of Texas, and you're going to do the formal adoption inside the United States, right? They terminate the rights of the parents, transfer the kid to you.
Even when the parents are not legal?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
They are legal for everything else, just immigration.
Yeah.
So they can go to state court the same way everybody else does. And then when that kid gets a birth certificate with you as the parent and the termination of the relationship with the biological parents, now that becomes your child. And if it is your child and you are a U.S. citizen, either the kid becomes automatically a U.S. citizen by law, or you can file a petition for them if the automatic citizenship doesn't kick in. Because sometimes if you are a citizen, your spouse is a citizen, you both adopt, the kid is under age and lives with you, sometimes you can file for a green card. The moment they get the green card, they become citizens automatically. So there's some requirements that you have to check. But yeah, that's an easier case. If the kid, though, is 18, it becomes more complicated, right? So the younger the kid, the easier in that case, because it becomes a child.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be treated like your child.
Yeah. Okay, well, viewers, he's loaded. It's been a loaded time. I'm not seeing the questions on Facebook, but I believe there are a few questions there. Let me see if I can find anything there on Facebook. Okay. There's a question on surrogacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're getting more complicated.
There's a question on surrogacy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the surrogacy is somebody carrying the baby for somebody else.
Yes.
So
Probably outside of the United States.
Oh, God. It was simple enough, huh? So the legal concept of surrogacy is recognized as...
Yeah, surrogacy is when somebody is carrying someone else's baby.
Yeah,
so for those that don't know.
The genes, the genetics do not belong to the person carrying the pregnancy. You get your DNA and your wife's, and you have an in vitro, and then you place that inside somebody to carry for you.
Yeah.
So theoretically, that person is like an incubator and doesn't have any rights to the kid. It is basically just carrying that kid for you. So the rights are the parents. When the kid is born, the birth certificate has your name on it and not the surrogate. Correct?
Yes.
So if that's the case and that's recognized by the country where this is being done, then it's not a problem. It's just like your wife having the baby.
Okay. So does that child becomes a U.S. citizen?
If the parents are, yes.
Yeah.
But if the surrogate is is a U.S. citizen and the parents are not, and then it doesn't.
It's not. It's,
Yeah.
yeah. So
It's
the
almost
parents,
like it's
yeah.
almost like a crib, you know.
Yeah.
It's just a outside the body incubator.
Okay, quick question, because someone had asked me this and I didn't know how to answer. A mom was filed for by their U.S. son. A mom was filed for a U.S. son.
So the son, U.S. citizen,
The son is a U.S.
try
citizen.
to bring the mom here.
No, the mom was already visiting.
Okay.
True story. Now filed for the mom, and the mom became a green card holder. Now, so when he filed for the mom had kids below 18, but they were not part of the petition.
Right.
Why?
That's normal.
Why is that?
Because when you are a U.S. citizen,
Yeah.
You can file for immediate relatives,
Mm-hmm.
and they do not have to wait. Remember, I told you the first visas.
Yes, they don't have to
every
wait.
year. Immediate relative,
No,
which is the
they're
parents.
in the U.S. now,
Doesn't matter. The parents.
and she's just
children.
7 years old.
Doesn't matter. The parents, the children,
Mm-hmm.
and the spouses of a U.S. citizen are immediate relatives. So those 7-year-old kid,
So what happened
what is
to
that?
them?
What is that kid?
Is in the U.S.
Is that,
as well.
is that a parent?
No.
Is there a kid of the petitioner?
No. Sibling.
Sibling is not
Yeah.
an immediate relative.
Because,
If sibling is not an immediate relative, immediate relatives get the visa right away, but they do not bring derivatives.
okay.
So if you ask the mom to come, the father doesn't come. It's one for the mom, one for the father, one for the spouse, one for each
So what
child.
happened to the child?
A petition has to be done specifically for each one of the
So who's
individuals.
going to file for that child?
The mom gets the visa, then the mom can bring her kid.
No, when the mom gets the green card, they're
then,
all
then
in
she
here.
can file for her kid.
Then she can now file for the kid.
Yeah.
When she gets the green
Or
card.
the U.S. citizen can file for a brother, but you know how long that takes?
Okay.
12 to
Let's
20
flip.
years.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but let's clarify.
Yes.
Now, U.S. citizen.
Now, let me tell you the difference.
Yes.
If you are a resident and then you file for your, let's do it differently. You are a U.S. citizen, you file for your brother. Takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
But once your brother comes, he brings the wife and all his kids under 21
Yeah, I
as
understand.
derivatives.
I
They
understand.
all get it,
Yeah.
but those are in the preference
Okay.
on the visa bulletin. The
Okay.
other categories,
Correct
not
me.
immediate relatives. Immediate relatives is one petition per person,
Okay.
no derivatives.
Am I right with this? A U.S. citizen files for someone they're married to.
Okay.
Now, that person have kids. The kids are covered.
Nope. But the kids can be on their own petition,
On their own
Because
petition
if-
with him, under him,
not with him, separately from him.
separate.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah, explain that to me.
If
How does that
somebody
work?
marries a American citizen, marries a woman, the woman has 2 kids. They got married before those kids turned 18. Therefore, for immigration purposes, they are considered to be children of that U.S. citizen, stepfather.
Yeah.
So a stepfather is a father for immigration purposes if he marries the mom before those kids turn 18.
Okay.
So if the kid is 17 and 16, he can now file the petition for the mom and for the 2 kids. Each one has its own petition.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Each one has one petition
So,
separately from the
separate
others.
petition. Yeah.
Now, if the mom divorces the father, guess what happens?
The petition for the kids goes on.
Goes on forever. And you can never divorce your kids.
You can.
You know that?
Yeah.
I had cases where the mom,
Wow.
the
Interesting.
mom divorced,
Hey
the
guys,
kids stays.
did you just hear that? Yeah. So, if interesting, these things are interesting. So, if a U.S. citizen gets married to a non-U.S. citizen that wants to adjust their status,
Right.
that have kids, so if petitioned for the mom, petition for all the kids below age 18.
One petition for each
Each
separately.
of them, separate for them. Now, as at when they got married, as long as the kids are below 18, if they turn 20, the petition still goes on.
Oh, the petition goes on forever.
Goes
Once
on.
it's approved, they are green card holders.
So as long as it's done before the age of 18.
If the marriage took place before the kid turns 18,
Yes.
you have until 21 to file.
Okay. Wow.
So you can file for the spouse, not for the kids immediately. But if you marry before the kids turn 18, you have until the kids turn 21
To file.
and they still get the benefit of.
Now,
if they turn more than 21, now they are no longer children. They are adult kids of that U.S., and that's a preference.
Okay. Okay. Now, question. Too many questions flying through my head.
You're getting so many hypotheticals, end up getting lost. But this is interesting because there are a lot of nuances here.
Yes.
And of course, I'm responding to the most known and easier. In the citizenship by derivation and marriages and people who live in the U.S. outside. I did a case the other day. It was kind of interesting. This mom, she's a U.S. citizen, but she was born abroad. So the father was a U.S. citizen who went to work overseas. And he worked overseas and had his children outside. And then she had a birth certificate registered in the consulate, right? Yeah. So she has a U.S. citizenship, even though she never lived in the U.S. She has 2 kids. First kid she had was outside the marriage. She was living with this guy but not married to him. And then she went to the consulate and they accepted and gave this kid a U.S. passport. Then she married this guy, who was the father of both kids. This time, the second kid didn't get a passport because the husband was not a U.S. citizen. So the law changed a few times back and forth. And now she comes to me saying the consulates wouldn't give my second kid his citizenship. He's going to turn 18 soon. And I said, the consulate is not going to give. But doing some research, and I didn't know that, but in doing the research, I discovered that USCIS has a different interpretation of the law than Department of State. So the consulates and the embassy go under the guise of the Department of State. And they have one rule, who they give and not give to. But in the U.S., we have the law, and USCIS will do it. So I told her, I can do it, but it has to be in the U.S. So we filed a petition here, and then we had to prove that the grandfather lived in the U.S. for at least 5 years. And some years have to be before he turned 18, some after. So we showed that he went to school here in Texas and in Stanford in California. And then he's one of those guys, the pictures we had to show, the yearbook pictures of this guy, engineering school back in the 30s or 40s, I don't know, long time ago, yearbooks and pictures and so forth. Friends that graduated with him, high school pictures, to show the guy actually spent enough years inside the United States because the mom never lived in the U.S. But as long as the grandfather did, a number of years, and we could prove it, the grandkid qualified through the grandfather. But it has to be inside the United States. So we had to do the whole process. And then we had an interview here in Dallas. They flew in, the mom and the kid, and we had an interview. Wow. And he got sworn in, and he got a certificate of citizenship all in the same day. Wow. And then they sent me a picture of the U.S. passport. The embassy never wanted to give him, had to do the passport. Wow. Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah. There are so many exceptions to the rule. Yeah. And it's very confusing. Okay. So sometimes you have to do a little research here and there to find out. Last
question because of time. Viewers, you please bear with us tonight. We started late. We had a little bit of technical challenges. That's why we're extending it. Last question. We can ask all the questions, in one sitting. I don't know if it's okay to put your phone number out there.
Sure.
Okay. Or if they need it, they can call and we'll.
Yes. Do you want me to give it?
Well, we'll give it towards the end of it. And the last question I have: what are the various ways you can extend your stay-to-stay status?
Extend status. So first of all, if you have to
B1,
see
B1
well
visa.
how you came in first. Right?
Yeah, B1.
So for instance, if you came in as a tourist
Yes.
or as a business visitor, so B1, B2. If you come here to do business, visit suppliers or have meetings or go to a convention, you should come in as a B1 because you came here to do business. If you come to visit friends and family or go to Disney, then you do a B2. If you're gonna do both, you tell them you should get both, and you should always check your I-94 because they don't stamp your passport anymore. They don't give you how long you're good for. Everything is done electronically. So as soon as you leave in the airport or inside the airport even, go to the CBP website and download your I-94 so you can see how many days they gave you and what category they gave you. You think they gave you a B2, but they may be giving you a B1 or vice versa. If you ask for one, they gave you another, you have to fix it. If they gave you just a month, you better know. You cannot assume it's 6 months. So today, because there's no stamps anymore, before you leave the airport, you better check. Because if something is not right, something is wrong, you go back there and then ask them to fix immediately. Otherwise, it becomes complicated. You have to prove that you actually flew in. How you prove it, right? People don't hold the boarding pass. Keep your boarding pass, your reservations, all of that stuff, because that may become important. But it gave you a status when it came in, F1. That F1 can be for a program of 3 months or 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, or can be a duration of status, which means for as long as you're studying, you have status. That's what the DS is what it means, duration of status. So that's for a student. And then you get an OPT, a practical training, you can stay some more time. So you can extend that way.
B1,
but
B2.
if you come in as a tourist and you want to stay, the question then becomes, what is the purpose of your visit? And you're going to tell, I came here to visit. And how long are you planning to stay? That's the second question. And you're going to say, I'm going to be 10 days. They still give you 6 months, but they may type in there 10 days. Or they may ask you, so where are you going to go? Do you have tickets? Do you have a return home ticket? And the officer can be inquiring you about, you saying you're going to be here for 10 days, where are you staying? Where's the reservation? Let me see your telephone. Can you give me the password? Let me look inside here. And they can find there that you already have an address to stay and you're planning to visit a family and never leave. If they think that you lied, either to get the visa at the consulate or at the time that you entered, you made a misrepresentation, you committed a lie or a fraud, they can deport you, they can void your visa right then and there. So it's important to be consistent when you first get the visa, when you first come in and you make a representation at the airport. And then once you are inside the country, you're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to do a lot of things. And most people forget that and they go try to find a job right away. The moment you start working, you violated your visa, you're out of status. Even though nobody knows, you're already out of status. So you have to be careful not to violate your visa. And then when you go ask for 6 more months, question now is, what happened? When you went to the consulate, you said I had a job. What happened to your job back home? What happened to your family, your dog, your pets, your fish? and people forget that. So you have to explain to them before you can get an extension that says, here's what's going to happen to my job. Is it still there? They're waiting for me. I have enough money in the bank, or my parents are paying for it, or I have savings. Here's my statement from the bank showing that I do not need to work to get 6 more months here. My job is not going to be gone, and my business is not going to disappear because I have a partner taking care of it. So you have to explain how you're going to stay, how long, show a ticket back at home 6 months later. So you have to send all of that in writing. A statement explaining it, ticket, 3 months of bank statement showing balances, enough for you not to have to work. If you can show all of that and the story makes sense, then they'll give you the 6 months. But it's probably going to take a year for them to give you 6 months. So you have to remember that in 6 months, even if the best case scenario, they gave you the 6 months you asked for, but they haven't answered, and it's 5 months, and you haven't been receiving the answer, file the second extension, assume you're going to get 6 months, so you bridge that for the next 6 months until you get an answer. You keep filing them, because if you don't, by the time they say no, you are out of status. But if you have another one, you have a period of authorized stay by the Attorney General while you're in good faith, you're waiting for the processing. So you can wait here. But the moment they say no, you have 10 days to get out. That's the grace period you got, right? So in order not to be in that situation, you keep bridging every 6 months, you keep sending another one.
Next filing keeps you going.
Yeah. But that doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
As I say, I have money for 6 months. After 6 months, I still have money for 6 more months. So if you're going to tell a story in writing, but your goal is actually to go to school, so you say, I need 6 more months because I decided I may want to go to school here. And I'm searching schools. So your first extension is to look for a school. The second one is a change of status to an F1, right? And you already have a cousin that takes care of your business. You're already showing that you have enough money in the bank. You have a story that makes sense. So what you do is you have 6 months at a time, but what you want to tell them is an overarching story that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you have to think ahead. Because the guy looking at this saying, oh, the guy said this, then he said that. So if the story goes everywhere, you lost credibility, it's going to be a problem eventually. But on the long run, you want to tell a story that makes sense. Not what's convenient at the time, but something that makes sense to immigration long term. Is it okay for you to change your mind? Yeah. But if you lie your way through every one of these, eventually you're going to get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand what you're telling them is. In the U.S., what works is you say what you're going to do and you do what you say. And you never get in trouble. So asking for those changes, you have to have a reason, that's something that's reasonable, something that's believable, is something that's consistent. It's not so easy. But if you look for somebody to help you, they're going to tell you, okay, so what do you want to go here? I know, actually, I want to get married. But I need 6 more months, right? Or somebody's going to do a EB3 for me. But if you tell them that, you already have the intent to stay.
Yeah.
And the extension is saying, I still want to leave, but just want a little bit more time. At one point, you're going to change your mind. And they're going to say, you know what? You already knew that all the way back there. So you lied to me. So I like the student visa to maintain status, as long as you're not working, more than I like extending the visitor visas.
Well,
Visitor visa is very short-lived, and sometimes it's not approvable, and people don't realize until it's too late, and then you get in trouble. But if you can go to school, because in school there is no limit. You keep going, you keep transferring, you keep going. At one point, if you have somebody sponsoring you for your staying, you can do that without having this chopped. Because in school, you go here to learn language, English, and then you go to a program that's associates, then you go to a bachelor's, then you go to a master. You can go to school for 20 years. Nobody's going to say anything.
Yeah.
But if you keep trying to extend a visitor, you have to show resources. You have to show a reason to be here. So why can't you do this back home? Why can't you leave and come back? It's much more difficult to extend visitor. A student's more consistent. It's done. They like the money. They like the schools to be surviving on your dime. So it's understandable that it takes a little bit longer. So I'd say to stay here, student visas are much more consistent, a lot easier. They're expected to last longer. But, it costs money and takes big effort. So sometimes if you have a 10-year visa on your passport, be in and out is much easier than try to stay long term.
Well, this is so much questions still coming in, but we're going to stop here today. Paul is going to give his number, if it's okay with you, online. You can call him to schedule an appointment if you have more questions to go in. But I'm going to ask you a question. We need a discount for...
They have to mention the pastor's name and
Okay.
and we'll give you a special price.
Okay.
So I'll give my number is the office number is 214-504-1185.
Is 214
04
504
1185.
85. You know, for someone that needs an immediate attention, how do you work around that?
When the girls answer the phone,
They
if you
should let them-
mention that you have an
Something
urgency,
urgent.
what it is, then we'll try to work out with you. If nowadays we're doing a lot of
Okay.
Zoom visits. Sometimes we do in person. The person is in town, but we have been doing a lot of Zoom since COVID started.
Yeah.
And sometimes
So
we
you
do
can do
Zoom
it
with even the people here.
Even
we do
there,
Zoom. Yeah.
over these outside the US, you can do a
Oh,
Zoom
yeah,
meeting
yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good, good.
Yeah.
Did we get the number online? Is again, what is the number again? 214 504
85.
1185. That's the number to Paul Callisto.
Yeah, tell them to
Yes, if
to
you
mention
if,
the
if you
pastor.
if you call, mention my name. It's gonna give you some good discount. And if Paul charge you too much, just call me. I'll talk to him. he's a great guy. Praise the Lord. Well, Paul, thank you so much for.
Yeah. Sorry,
doing-
I speak sometimes long and winded, so we went over time. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's not easy to reduce
Yes.
this concept because it's easy
To explain it.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I have a hard time speaking just a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Thank
it's
you
a pleasure. It's a
thank
pleasure.
You, thank you so much for coming. We'll do this again, you know.
Sometime.
Maybe somewhere
Sure.
next year we'll come back focus on some more specific
Sure.
We didn't talk much about the EB5. We'll talk some
Right, for the investors. This is a good program that came back now. So
yeah. So thank you so very much. Well, you've got his number. Reach out to him. This is not a legal counsel. You know, when you
yeah,
talk
it's
to
not legal advice.
it's not
but
legal
it is,
advice.
You
So
need to get specifics
specific,
for
yeah.
a case before we can give you anything that you can
legal
use.
advice,
So,
so you
this is
can call
generic
him
information.
and talk to him. Thank you so very much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Pastor.
Thanks for coming. Thank you. We couldn't have Santana today.
No, he's
had,
going to Miami. So.
He told me. Thank you so much for coming. And thanks for being with us. Our programs usually are 1 hour, 7 to 8. At the beginning, we had some little glitches with our system, but so we started late. So please bear with us. We needed to just wrap this up today. God bless you. I'll see you next week, Monday. Bye now.